warm welcome, distinguished panelists, special guests, students, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Aspen India, the American Center, and iLead Institute, a very warm welcome to each one of you. This evening's panel is it's going to explore India's role in strengthening relations with her neighbors and how it's done. It'll raise questions, we'll explore how it's done bilaterally through regional mechanisms, and it's also going to look at how, despite some historical differences, how India is endeavoring to broaden the stakes of development, especially for her immediate neighbors. So before we delve into the discussion, I want to extend a very warm welcome to Helen. Helen is the American Consul General, who recently, just a month ago actually, who started her assignment in Kolkata. So warm welcome to Kolkata, Helen. Helen is an experienced foreign affairs specialist with a master's degree in American Studies from Virginia and another master's in national security strategy from the National Defense University. Having joined the Foreign Service in 1998, Helen has since served in Baghdad, Bahrain, Angola, and Chennai, and I'm told she's delighted to be back in India. So Helen, a warm welcome to our city of joy, and you shall see some more of the joy. Right time to be here in Kolkata, leading up to the Durga Puja festivities, which I'm sure you will enjoy every bit of it. So may I invite you up to just say a few words.
Thank you very much. I am delighted to be here in Kolkata and back in India. I want to thank everybody who has come here tonight for this important panel. I especially want to thank our hosts, iLead and Aspen Institute. It is an honor for me to be here, and it's a timely discussion on India's role in regional cooperation. Is India ready to walk the extra mile? From an American perspective, we'd say yes. I'd say yes. My boss would say yes, Ambassador Powell. Her boss, Secretary Kerry, would say yes. And of course, his boss, President Obama, would say yes. So we firmly stand on one side of this. President Obama has called the India-U.S. relationship a defining partnership of the century ahead. And a big part of that partnership is working regionally together in Asia. And so this is an important thing for us as we look at our relationship, our strategic partnership with India. India is increasingly looking east for its own growth and security needs towards Southeast Asia and beyond. Historically, as I know you all know, India wields influence in the neighborhood through economic and cultural ties. I don't think that I need to tell this audience that the Indian literature is celebrated throughout Southeast Asia, and the largest Hindu temple in the world is in Cambodia. These regional cultural ties, enhancing them, will benefit everybody. We believe, America believes that restoring these links, enhancing these links, and growing these links between India and the East will work to increase the partnership regionally for India and with the United States. In addition to the growing economic and cultural ties, India has an important role to play in regional security. As India's security architecture evolves, and I'm going to really let the experts speak about this, but I just want to say, we know that India will be an increasingly important player, and already India is at the table with annual East Asia Summit talks, and the United States, Japan, and India hold annual trilateral discussions. The question might be, why is the United States so interested in India being involved? One of the main reasons is, throughout the world, India's democratic institutions are looked upon as models for young democracy, which is why the United States work with India to help nascent democracies worldwide build their election processes, build their democratic processes. We hope that India will also use its ability to help build regional institutions within the Southeast Asia region as they have here in India. As India is looking east, the United States is looking west You probably have heard about President Obama rebalancing our relations towards Asia. When we look at Asia, we see, as everybody sees, a very large continent and very many American interests. So as India looks east and the United States looks west, what do we see? We see a diverse continent with over 1 billion members of the middle class. This is something that's happened within many of our lifetimes, that big dramatic increase in economic wealth and power in the region. And this is something that we all need to be paying close attention to, as we all are, as we're here today. The youth of Asia, transforming Asia. We have seen reform processes in Burma coming to be, and of course the recent elections in Malaysia and Cambodia. We could talk probably individually about all the neighboring countries, and I'll leave it to the panelists today to decide how they're going to frame that conversation. But the core of our approach is that in understanding diplomatic, security, and economic relations in the Asia-Pacific region, the United States and India have converging interests, and we want to work together with India. I'm going to let the panelists go into the challenges and the opportunities ahead, but I just wanted to throw in a little American perspective here as I come to India, and also thank again our hosts for hosting us today, and I'm looking forward to a very vibrant, exciting conversation as we look forward to seeing perspectives on India in the region. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helen. We have a strong and distinguished panel today, and they represent different aspects of, in really different areas of expertise. And we have requested that they give us their perspective on the topic today from different angles, and really looking at the diplomatic relations, the defense and strategy angle, and also the business opportunities angle. And bringing this all together is our moderator, Indrani Bagchi. I'm going to very briefly, and most of you have their bios, so I'm going to very briefly just introduce them and then request them to come up to the dais. Ambassador Alok Sen is a former Indian ambassador to Myanmar, and he was based in Myanmar until July 2010, when he retired from the Indian Foreign Service. He earlier held ambassadorial positions in Cambodia and Turkey. His diplomatic experience spans more than 3 decades. Our next panelist is Major General Arun Roy, a graduate of the National Defense Academy. He has seen frontline action in Jammu and Kashmir, in Sikkim, Gujarat and Rajasthan, amongst many others. He was also on a diplomatic assignment of military and defense as the military and defense advisor in the USA. He is presently the executive director of the research CENERS, which stands for the Center for Eastern and Northeastern Regional Studies in Kolkata. And our third panelist is Shiv Siddhant Kaul. Siddhant is the Vice President of Indian Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Managing Director of NICO Engineering Services. Siddhant has a MSc from the Princeton University, where he also taught as a graduate instructor. He worked for over 4 years in New York with the Bank of America before returning to Kolkata to join the NICO group. And finally, our moderator, Indrani Bagchi. Indrani is the diplomatic editor, senior editor in Times of India, and she has been also a Reuters Fellow at Oxford University and was awarded the fellowship by the Asia Foundation to study US-China relations at Brookings Institute in Washington, D.C. And I'm most proud to say that Indrani is also part of Aspen India's leadership initiative and has come down for this occasion, for this evening, to be with us from Delhi. So thank you, Indrani. And may I request all the panelists to please come up onto the dais. Thank you.
Gentlemen, and at the outset I ask for forgiveness for the state of my throat. Viruses are not respectful of seminars in Calcutta, but I'm happy to assure you that you will not have to hear too much of me today, because we have a a stellar panel here. I will hope to set the ball rolling by giving what I think is a brief overview of India in the region. It's the core of Indian foreign policy, is India's immediate neighborhood, and for a lot of people it would mean only Pakistan, but I think Indian policy has evolved, has matured over the years, and we are now we have a full spectrum relationship with all our immediate neighbors from Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Nepal, Bhutan, Maldives, all the way up to Vietnam, Cambodia. They all form part of, I won't say all of them form part of our Look East policy, but certainly they form part of India's core foreign policy interests in Asia. In the immediate neighborhood, India has very, very strong interests, and the Indian policy over the past decade has evolved thus, that India invites its neighbors to be part of the economic development that India has benefited from, be part of the security matrix in this region, and hopefully we will all be better friends. You will hear from our panelists that probably historically India probably was not such a great neighbor. And I think the evolution in India's policy and evolution in Indian outlook is a consequence of India's own development in the journey that India has taken towards economic and political development in this nation, and the desire that a peaceful periphery is imperative for a furthering of India's own development. With those words, I will start with Ambassador Alok Sen, who has been part of India's foreign policy in this region for many, many years now. He has been instrumental he has been the practitioner of India's Look East policy. He has been a practitioner of India's immediate neighborhood policy, and I will now request Ambassador Sen to share his thoughts with us.
Good evening. The title of today's discussion is India's role in regional cooperation. It has a problem clause. Is India ready to walk the extra mile? I have some reservations about that, but I'll come to that later. Firstly, why do we do regional cooperation? The virtues of regional cooperation are taken as a given, but why? Now, most countries have economic issues that they by themselves cannot deal with. So they join together with neighboring countries. There is merit in pooling resources with neighbors. You get economy of scale. You take advantage of complementarity. And a regional grouping most definitely has greater bargaining power in both trade and political terms than any of the single members. We can think of ASEAN, European Union, to make this point clear. Regional cooperation also needs an engine, one or two countries that will provide the motive power and that will haul the process forward. You can think of Germany and France for European Union. You can think of the old five in the context of ASEAN. Now, the platforms, coming to India, the platforms for regional cooperation that are relevant for India, I would think SAARC, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, which is a South Asia outfit, and BIMSTEC, a kind of a hybrid organization that takes 5 of South Asian and 2 of Southeast Asian countries together. BIMSTEC, I think, is a kind of an extension of what we are trying to do with the SAARC. Now, the engine for cooperation in South Asia by popular choice seems to be India, which is quite logical. We have certain relative advantages vis-à-vis our neighbors, the size, the resource spread, the stage of our national economic development, political stability, etc. But assumption of a leadership role also brings with it a risk. Exposure to resentment and resistance from the others, which is again not surprising given the political history of South Asia. India sometimes feels boxed in by what it considers ungrateful neighbors who are not acknowledging the asymmetric, non-reciprocal concessions that India is making to them. The neighbors in turn think India is a neighborhood bully. So that's the situation. So cooperation in South Asia, if we keep the situation, the things I just now explained in mind, cooperation in South Asia cannot but proceed by fits and starts. We see a flurry of activities whenever there is a summit or other high-level meetings, but at the end of the day, on a sober assessment, one has to accept that cooperation is far less than what it should have been. It is also pertinent to remember that SAARC is nearly 3 decades old. So apart from the absence of a climate of trust that has hampered cooperation, the member countries are also hobbled by serious resource crunch. The SAARC Development Fund, for instance, has a corpus of a mere $243 million, most of it India's contribution, to undertake projects in social, economic and infrastructure sectors in member countries. So there is a need for very careful marshalling of resources. There is a mismatch here between ambition and capacity. Too many initiatives crowd the agenda. These make for good press, photo opportunities. Sometimes there are compromises between competing countries, but the result is lack of focus and of progress. So while regional cooperation in South Asia has to go on and India has to stay the engine, I think a couple of adjustments might actually be beneficial. For example, SAARC and BIMSTEC, for that matter, could consider applying the subset approach that ASEAN has tried and found useful. Now, what is the subset approach? Projects are encouraged among a smaller number of member countries, 2 or 3, based on the consideration of their geographical proximity or a specific need that they themselves can meet together without involving the machinery of the entire 10-member group in lengthy bureaucratic exercises. These subsets can act as the building blocks of cooperation at the ground level, and the group in a top-down manner can supply policy, strategic planning and funds. In the context of South Asia, think of Nepal and Bhutan as a subset, or India and Bangladesh. For specific projects, if they are implemented properly, will add to the prosperity of the SAARC region. My second suggestion is that the list of projects and initiatives be drastically pruned. This would sharpen focus and improve chances of their success. Finally, I come to my reservation. Is India ready to walk the extra mile? I would consider this question places a disproportionate burden of expectation on one single member, India, and somehow distorts the simple truth that participating countries do regional cooperation in self-interest. I think if India has to play a leading role in SAARC, in regional cooperation, it has to have this message clearly given. India should also try to get the focus back in the working of SAARC and BIMSTEC, and of course ensure implementation of a good project or two. SAARC needs proof of success. A successful project may galvanize the organization to strive for more success. The reverse would be a SAARC bogged down in verbiage and rhetoric. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Sen. We have looked in disappointment at SAARC in the past 3 decades and found it bogged down with political problems, particularly between India and Pakistan, which has, in a way, hobbled SAARC. BIMSTEC certainly has a higher chance of survival. I think the burden of responsibility on India is necessarily higher than on the other countries, particularly if you look at the asymmetry between the two countries, between the nations around. But in the aspect of regional cooperation, I think one of the things that we need to look at much more carefully is the issue of regional security. South Asia is prone to terror attacks. We've been prone to separatist insurgencies. General violence in the neighborhood is fairly high. In this, how does India maintain its own security interests while accommodating security interests of other nations? But much more important than how does India's neighborhood acknowledge, appreciate and cater to India's security interests? To talk about this, Major General Roy. Sir.
Thank you very much, Ms. Magji. It's always difficult to speak to your audience, address an audience, but it is more so when you speak after an illustrious and erudite speaker like Ambassador Sen. That notwithstanding, I would like all of you to take your attention to this map and imagine what is to the right of it and what is to the south of it. Individually, this map would reveal to you that India is at the center. It's at the heart. And to its right and left are its neighbors, part of South Asia. And if you look at it in a different manner, it's like an hourglass where the scrimp of the hourglass is somewhere near Sri Lanka. And the upper portion of the hourglass has at its rim Uzbekistan, Tajikistan on the left and China and Far East to the right. Similarly, if you look at the lower portion, there's a vast Indian Ocean which covers the lower half of the hourglass, and to its west is the southern tip of South Africa, and on the east is the Australia. Now this, ladies and gentlemen, is the area of interest, not necessarily just the neighboring countries of South Asia. What we are looking at today is, I've been told in the subject that there is a peaceful neighborhood, and the neighbors also enjoy a peripheral peaceful area. Well, that is debatable, whether we do have a peaceful neighborhood or whether our neighbors have a peaceful neighbors by extension. If you look at it, the Indian Ocean portion, that's the southern portion, India virtually controls it. It controls all the inlets and outlets, whether if you take Malacca, Straits of Malacca, Straits of Hormuz and Aden. All the Indian ports and the military outposts, air bases are so located that they can cover it. We have, in the northern portion of the hourglass, we have a problem. We have Pakistan to our west, which, as you know, is in constant turmoil, internally and externally. Not that we are not. We too are internally in turmoil, somewhat of a little, but to a lesser degree, but we are. We have Nepal to the north, which today is no more a buffer to India. We have Bhutan, also in the north. Perhaps the only constant factor in our relationships in South Asia. We have Bangladesh in between our country, which we assisted in creating in 1971. Not creating history, but creating geography, actually. Which, depending on the government of the day, is either with India or against India. Then we have Sri Lanka. Now this is a little funny situation here. They depend on us for many things, and yet publicly they are arrayed against India at many forums. And you take to the extreme southwest of the Maldives, that I am also told is part of South Asia. And Maldives is unpredictable at the moment till we have the next elections there. Now, let us look what bonds neighbors together. Culture. We have common culture with all the neighbors, but it hasn't helped us bond over the last 6 or 7 decades. Common aims and perceptions. I don't think I need to elaborate on that, because our aims, our missions and our outlook is totally different. Demography has a say in that too, and the religious intents of the various nations. So that leaves us with only one, that is trade. If we have enough trade, and if we are interdependent on each other for trade, for items, perhaps there will be some kind of dependency on each other. Somehow or the other, our political establishments, perhaps due to reasons which are not known to me, did not give a thrust in this direction. Now let us take, if a country is good in producing clothes like Bangladesh, could it have the capacity to produce more clothes for a market of 1 billion plus in India? Perhaps not. India has good production in manufacturing heavy machinery. It could easily give heavy machinery to its neighbors. And this is the kind of interdependency that I am talking about. Perhaps it will happen at some future stage, but at the moment it is nowhere in sight. Coming down to the US Consul General's point of issue, is India ready to look beyond its neighbors and take responsibility for actions beyond the neighbor periphery? For the last 3 decades or so, that is when the message and the SAARC was formed, I've been hearing a particular sentence that India is a potential power. I do not know whether we have performed the potential or whether we are a power. But what we definitely are, by geopolitical location, we do enjoy a strategic enhancement because of our location in the region. That is what perhaps gives us the power. India will never be an US, which has got influence all over the region. At best, India can have an area of interest looking beyond, let us say, from South China Sea in Vietnam, and looking up to, let us say, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, who are trying to influence or create a problem in Afghanistan. The real test for India actually will come when US leaves Afghanistan in 2014, next year. China has already had a pact with Afghanistan to train its security forces directly. It will not take part in giving money, the $4.1 billion for the security forces of Afghanistan, but it will certainly train their security forces. If one can gauge as to what is likely to happen, is that India will be jostling for influence, the Russians will be jostling for influence, the Iranians will be jostling, so will the Tajikistan and Uzbeks. Well, I mean, what I foresee is perhaps the Northern Alliance, what was the Northern Alliance earlier, is going to fight the Taliban in Afghanistan. Well, that's in the future. What can India do there? As you know, that India declined to give them arms for their security forces. It's odd, but all the same, we did decline. We've got billions of dollars there invested in various mining projects and other projects, but we declined to give arms. We have a very minimal force there just for force protection. A nation which is looking to be a power sometime in the near future, a nation which the US feels is being will be assertive in the near future, this kind of action in Afghanistan does not really substantiate that. Second thing, now come to the other end, South China Sea. The Vietnamese clearly made a statement about Indian presence in South China Sea. Why? To ensure security and peaceful resolution of the problems in South China Sea. India did send the ONGC for certain blocks. What did China do? China claimed those blocks and started drilling themselves. Fortunately, they never came to firing at each other. This issue over there is a stalemate. However, China did get a message on this issue that if it ups the ante, perhaps India is likely to not retaliate, likely to stand firm on its beliefs. Now let's come down to Pakistan. Well, I don't think there's anything to say over here. All of us over here are well read enough. This is something, but what has to happen that Pakistan's identity is not India. The Pakistanis must realize that they are a separate entity all by themselves. They are obsessed by India. They took half of Kashmir. Now they claim all of Kashmir. And that, they say, is the basic problem. And if that vanishes, everything will be okay. No. If today you draw a line and call the LOC between India and Pakistanish Kashmir as the IB, does that stop the jihadis or the terrorists crossing? It's just an imaginary line on the border. So just think over that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think what we should concentrate on is where we are successful on certain issues and aspects. We should try and buttress that. And trade is the way to go. Wars are obsolete. There will be no wars. There may be terrorism, the neighbors will keep sniping at you, but in the overall outlook of aspects and issues, one has to remember that national interests come first. And talking about walking the extra mile, I'm sorry, I don't think any country will walk the extra mile and undermine its own interests. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Major General Roy. I think you've made the perfect segue for Siddhant. I think certainly trade is something that we have seen grow in the immediate neighborhood. Bangladesh, after getting duty-free access to the Indian market, and Bangladesh's exports have jumped to about 58%. Sri Lanka is one of the greatest beneficiaries of a free trade agreement with India, as is Thailand. Pakistan, of course, is yet to join the free trade bandwagon, but I think we will get there. There is an inevitability to trade with Pakistan. I don't think the worst doomsday sayers in Pakistan would be able to work against. Siddhant, since you have been part of regional trade, so to speak, would you like to take on where we would be if we are all good trading neighbors?
So, coming after two real experts, I'm only going to be a sort of semi-armchair expert. I hope all of you can hear and see me. I'm going to stay here. It's a little more comfortable. I hope you don't mind. But coming back to Indira's comments, trade is something that is going to drive India's regional efforts, because I think India's realized that it needs to grow in order to meet its national objectives, and trade is a quick way to do that. So I'm going to focus more on where the trade potential is, the countries, the neighbors with which there is large potential that is not yet explored, where there is potential for growth. And so I'm going to look at ASEAN countries, Bangladesh, and China. Those are the three areas I think we need to focus on. So let's start with ASEAN. ASEAN, India have had a FTA, or a free trade agreement, for some time now. And it's been growing at a fairly fast clip. The trade between India and ASEAN has been growing at a compounded 22% over the last 7-8 years. In the year ending 2012, India-ASEAN trade has reached 80 billion, which is a fairly large figure. And it's more than actually what we had expected it to be. Thailand itself is a large component of that. There's a separate agreement with Thailand in place, and that is expected to touch 16 billion in the next 2 years. Earlier, the trade was restricted to goods and services, well, rather just goods actually. And now, last year, the agreement was extended to investments and services. And services, we all know, is where India has found great success. So I think, and I certainly hope, that Indian service industries are going to expand their presence in the ASEAN countries. The goal now for bilateral trade between India and ASEAN is 100 billion in 2015, which, based on present trends, should be achieved. Let's look at the next country, which is very key and critical, not just to trade but also security and political interests, and that's Bangladesh. And one of the main things about Bangladesh, where we almost succeeded, was to allow Bangladesh to be a corridor for trade between India's mainland and the northeast, which is in many ways like an isolated island where transport and trade comes in. So we managed to kind of snatch defeat from the jaws of victory there, and the route through Bangladesh, which was supposed to happen, hasn't yet materialized, but we're still trying. And I think one of the reasons why there has been such emphasis in the government has been to promote our northeast and to link it truly and firmly with the rest of the country without going through the chicken's neck of Siliguri. So Bangladesh trade has now reached 5 billion. In the Southeast Asian countries, Bangladesh has overtaken Sri Lanka as India's largest trading partner. And a lot of that is inbound because textiles, as some of my fellow panelists have mentioned, is now easy to get from Bangladesh. There's a lot of textiles coming in. We love Porto Relish, and depending on supply, fish comes in. But fish is not the only agro product. We have other agricultural products coming in from Bangladesh. And in response, we send engineered goods, and most recently, we also plan to start exporting power to Bangladesh, which I think is going to be very positive. I know we sometimes feel that we don't have enough power for ourselves, but in the absence of a national grid, sometimes it's nice to have the ability to export power, and instead of wasting it or toning down the production capabilities of the plants. From Bangladesh's side, though, the issue they most are concerned about is non-tariff trade barriers. So India is perhaps a little more ahead in the development race, and they would like a little relaxation in how products are labeled and labor standards and all of that. And I don't think India really should relent there. I think there's a lot of pressure from all of Bangladesh's trade partners that Bangladesh upgrades its internal standards, and I think that probably will continue if the pressure is there from the trading partners. Myanmar is perhaps the most exciting opportunity, and there are two main things that are happening in Myanmar that India is sponsoring to encourage trade. One is to promote the border crossing. In the state of Manipur, there is a small town called More, and there's a correspondingly small town on the other side, on the Myanmar side, and that's called Tamil. I thank you. And there's a border there, there's the Indo-Myanmar Friendship Bridge. We had a delegation from the Indian Chamber of Commerce that did the land route. We crossed the border, and it took a little time, but we made it, and there's a lot of trade that happens there. And the idea is that this road will be extended all the way to Mandalay, and I think it will help not just trade from India to Myanmar, but also a lot of agricultural produce will go from Myanmar to India, and it will also relieve the transportation requirement for that to come from the Indian mainland. So there's very exciting times in Myanmar. The other big project was the multimodal Kaladan project, which is a port in a town called Sitwe, which is kind of close to the Bangladesh border, but it's only 1 day sailing time from Kolkata. The idea was there would be a ship going there, and then the river going upstream towards the Manipur border again, Mizoram border. And this entire network, I happen to be at Sitwe. It's pretty remarkable that an Indian company is doing the project. It's very difficult to do work there, but they're making progress. There are also ethnic problems in that part of Myanmar, but once that is built, I think it will again be, Myanmar will be a part of India's own internal trade route, which means that the two will be linked very closely together. The other countries, the other big country really that we need to talk about is China. And India-China trade is $66 billion, which is a big number, probably India's largest trading partner. Of that, the trade deficit is $39 billion. So there's a lot of imbalance there, and I don't see it going away anytime soon. We talk about their need for balance, but the fact is China has been running large trade surpluses with almost everyone in the world, with the US, with Europe. And it's not just China. Japan has been doing that for even longer. So I don't think it's necessarily unsustainable. We may not like it, but from an economic standpoint, I don't see a problem with it personally. The question is, who's going to finance that? Is it going to be financed through China? Is it going to be financed by our other trading partners? Is it going to be financed by investors? Historically, the answer is that it's financed through investment flows that are coming in. And I think that will continue because India will continue to grow. We might be a little short right now, but that's not going to be the same way for very long. And I think the other thing that will happen is that the large Chinese corporations will start to invest here. So that will help to reduce some of that trade gap and certainly increase FDI in the country, which would be great. They want to go the way of the Korean companies. You have the Hires, you have the motor companies, Geely Motors, you have the telecom companies, Huawei, and I think the model that they will follow is the Korean LG, Samsung, Hyundai type models, which will be very positive because one of the reasons we are so edgy about China is because there's a lack of regular communication, there's a lack of regular interaction, and if we have people coming over running companies, I hope that it fosters interaction and mutual trust. There is a cultural difference between Indian and Chinese companies, and the prism I would like to look at that is what have Indian companies doing overseas and what have Chinese companies been doing overseas. So you see there's a big gap because the Chinese companies have been very aggressively expanding in Africa, North America, all over. Of course, Southeast Asia as well. India has not been as aggressive, and the interesting thing about the Chinese expansion is it's been directed by their PSUs, their state-owned enterprises. These state-owned enterprises are not as bureaucratic from what I've read as ours. They can pull the trigger very quickly. They take risks. I'm sure they make mistakes. There have been a couple of high-profile blow-ups, scams and all that, but they still go ahead. In India, it's only now that we're starting to get into that game a little bit. You have the odd ONGC announcement of a partnership stake in an offshore oil block. Vietnam is one, and there are other areas that they're focusing on as well. Then you have NTPC and some of the coal guys looking to do this as well. It's a great sign, but I worry that it won't be done fast enough. Of course, the private sector is been doing it for a little longer. You had the large Airtel expansion into Africa. It's not been great for the shareholders, but there's a commitment that's been made there, and I'm sure over time it will prove to be a good investment. We had, of course, the high-profile expansions into Europe with the Tata Group and US with Aditya Birla. And I think everyone is looking very closely now into Africa. The question is, can we get there fast enough? I'm not sure. India has had so much opportunity in the domestic market over the last decade that perhaps we've lost a little bit of the international focus, which we need to recapture. You had waves of Indian entrepreneurs in the 60s and the 50s leaving India because there was a lack of opportunity, and they did very well. That slowed, but I think we'll start to see some of it happen again, not as entrepreneurs, but as corporations, which is perhaps an evolution. We talked a little bit about regional associations from a business point of view. There is, really our business has the bandwidth only to focus on one or two. The number of acronyms that are out there is truly remarkable, and you have BIMSTEC, ASEAN, SASEC, Mekong Ganges, BRICS, SAARC, SAPTA, and I think as a business you will probably end up focusing only on one or two. So you need to know your market, you need to go there, spend time there, and I think different people will choose different forums. The good thing is that because of these dialogues, our foreign services is well equipped to guide the business community in these new areas, and hopefully this will lead to a dispersion and a full utilization of our diplomatic corps. It's very necessary also that the IFS is expanded. I think last 2 or 3 years, perhaps the government has belatedly realized this. Recruitment for the IFS is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that's maybe 30 a year. Or that's woefully low. That's woefully low. We really need to push and project ourselves through our foreign service, and I hope this is given a big thrust. You know, if there's a model that we can find to help business, you know, pay for this expansion indirectly, I think that should be explored. Just one more point, you know, what are the areas I think that Indian businesses are well equipped to expand into? Healthcare is one, both, especially inbound tourism. I think everyone in the region recognizes the quality of healthcare that we can provide here in India. Also, I mean, Thailand has got good healthcare, Singapore has got good healthcare, but I think India is far more cost effective than these places. And the reputation of Indian doctors is excellent. I think more and more people will come here for these kind of procedures, and we need to try and promote it a little more. Education, I know there's a community of Koreans that live in Calcutta just for the purpose of exposing their children to English language education. It's a very strong skill, and I think, again, it's something that should be promoted, and especially the IITs, IIMs, they need to have exchange programs. China is doing this very aggressively in Africa. They're sponsoring people to come learn engineering, learn medicine, and I think we need to do this because it's a way of projecting our soft power. We really do have soft power in these soft areas. We need to start projecting it, we need to start using it. Skill development kind of goes with education, but there we are doing a lot of work. Tourism can be very, very major. The Buddhist circuit is a big destination in the Southeast Asian countries, in Sri Lanka. We need to make it easier for people to come there. Connectivity needs to improve, infrastructure needs to improve, and this is a good way to earn foreign exchange and reduce some of that trade imbalance. Personal care products, VLCC, I was interested to hear, has expanded into Malaysia and Singapore, and I think they'll be going more and more into Southeast Asia. So it's very nice to see that. I think we'll see more of that happening. Traditionally, Ayurveda and Indian cosmetics is starting to catch on a little bit in the West, and let's look east there as well. And last, and I think perhaps the most interesting, is really a way to combine our strategic defense objectives and trade objectives, is to encourage defense industry, you know, use some technology tie-ups, help countries that want to build up their navies, such as Vietnam. There's already a shipbuilding cooperation that is, you know, moving ahead. But let's accelerate that. We're opening up the defense sector to Indian companies in India. Let's use that, let's leverage that to help these other countries in our region build their defenses. I think, you know, that will send a very strong signal to neighbors that we are not to be trifled with. I think when I was in Vietnam 2 years ago, you know, people said that, you know, I wish you guys come here more often, we like you, we want to be friends with you. And this is guys, you know, who are just randomly you're meeting. It's not part of a trade mission. I was there as a tourist. And I really think this is something that, you know, we need to try and open up. We have excellent defense manufacturing institutes here, especially in shipbuilding. And perhaps together with the ships building, railways is somewhere where we have a lot of expertise. These countries don't have a very developed railway system, especially in the Southeast Asian regions. And let's use this, again, where we have traditional advantages, and let's try and branch out. We did this kind of work in Africa. I remember my grandfather was in the railways, and he was, you know, building railways in the Sudan and in Iraq. And I think there's some merit in trying to follow the same model in Southeast Asia specifically, and maybe Bangladesh as well. So I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Siddharth. That was most interesting. We have some time for question and answer. So do raise your hand, identify yourself. I will exercise my privilege as moderator by asking the first question. Ambassador Sen, this is something we hear when we travel to... Am I not audible? Hello. Ambassador Sen, this is something we hear when we travel through, at least through Southeast Asia, which is, where are you? We want you here, where are you? You have served in Southeast Asia, is that something you have heard? And what is your response to countries like Vietnam, to countries like Philippines that ask for us, that for a more robust Indian presence in that region? What do you say to them?
Am I audible now? Yeah, this is absolutely right. You have this kind of sentiment there, but that has to be seen in a context. Can I be heard? Yeah. That has to be seen in a context. You know, small countries, I mean, I served in Cambodia, I served in Myanmar. Now, these small countries, they feel comfortable if they have options. You know, one single country putting a stranglehold over their economy is not a very comforting thought. Or even strategically speaking, that's not at all comforting. So they ask, where is India? This is absolutely true.
What do you say to them?
What do I say to them?
As ambassador?
No. See, I mean, on a serious note, most definitely, you know, depending our presence there, what is? There's no other, nothing else to say.
Major General Roy, there is, former Prime Minister Vajpayee used to say that India's neighborhood extended from the Straits of Malacca to the Gulf of Aden. And as part of Operation Enduring Freedom, one of the things that Indian ships did was to escort energy vessels through the Straits of Malacca. In the last decade, also we have seen Indian naval presence, at least, expand significantly in the neighborhood. We have not seen Indian Army or Air Force presence extend in the same way as we have seen Indian naval presence. What does it take for the Indian defense system to project defense power or defense cooperation in the neighborhood?
I would just like to extend the area of interest from Straits of Malacca to Gulf of Aden to the western seaboard of Australia and the southern tip of South Africa. Now, most of the trade in the world passes through this area. If these nations of Australia and South Africa and India can reach, strategically I am talking of, an understanding, they can well control this vast expanse. Now, talking about intervention or presence, I would say presence, not intervention, of Indian forces other than the Navy in this area, the fact is Indian politicians are basically very conservative by nature. That notwithstanding, whenever it was required, you will recollect in the tsunami which took place in Indonesia, Maldives, when it was required. And there are some countries even today which are bordering in the north, perhaps, where we do have a presence where it is, where we feel it is required. And the only issue that actually hampers is the convergence of thought and beliefs between the Ministry of External Affairs and Ministry of Defense and what the NSA. So do we have. And as and when required, hopefully the system will work and some kind of expansion will be able to be question. But as I said, the real test will come next year after US leaves of Kurdistan. Let's see what happens there.
Well, let us certainly not get into the battles between the MEA and the Ministry of Defence. That is subject for another, but yes, let me, sir, if you could identify yourself.
Well, my name is Professor R.C. Bhattacharya from Globe Street Business School. And thank you very much for enlightening us with so much thoughts. But Ambassador Sen and General Roy apparently looked as if you were a little bit discouraged or something, not so, that much India wanted to walk that extra mile or not. It was a little bit downside. But Mr. Cowell was speaking very encouragingly that something will happen. My point was like that. We have talked about terrorism, we talked about trade, but one thing I want to ask Ambassador Sen, would you agree that in the whole of area, including Southeast Asia, illiteracy, poverty, and common goodwill seems to be there? The illiteracy, all of these, including Myanmar or wherever, illiteracy, and the poverty, and the common goodwill amongst people. Whatever the politicians might be saying or not, I have traveled extensively and I found common goodwill. I don't think they're bad. As Mr. Kaul said, Bangladeshis, Pakistanis, everybody is coming here for healthcare and all this. So it looks these three common things are there. Now, coming back to what we do. And one thing has not been talked about, in my opinion, I think it is a good thing. Energy security. One is this normal security, terrorism and all this, the other is energy security. As I understand, oil, and forget, including USA, we have got something now in shale oil, but I must remind even the ambassador here, that oil will not last more than, oil will not last more than 50 years, and natural gas will not last more than 75 years, and coal will not last more than 120 years. So as against that background, do we need an energy security in the area? And that means that bringing oil and gas from Pakistan to India and helping Bangladesh with power and all these. So these are the points I would like you to Ambassador Sen to answer. Thank you.
Well, I'll start with it.
Yes.
I'll start with a clarification. I don't have anything against India, walking the extra mile. I have no problem with that. The point I was trying to make is, it's a matter of principle. Regional cooperation, unless all stakeholders understand that it is for their own good, in their own self-interest, cooperation cannot proceed beyond the point. That was a principle I was trying to establish. If, in spite of all that, India does go the extra mile, why not? I have no problem with that. Your second point was about goodwill. Yeah, absolutely. At people's level, there's plenty of goodwill for India. No question about that. In what is the third point?
Energy security.
Energy security, yeah, very much so. Energy security is very important, but there we have lost a few good opportunities because of our delay and the time we take. Our delivery record is most unimpressive. We move very slowly, and we lost two definitely most attractive gas fields of Myanmar, A1 and A3. And they would have been ours if we had moved more purposefully and quickly. Energy security is very important. We completely agree.
I'm slightly intrigued that we have talked about BCIM and SARC, BIMSTEC and SARC, but nobody here seems to be thinking that very much of the BCIM, which is also a regional grouping. Perhaps for the reason that China is there, I don't think, is it because of the fact that because China is part of BCIM, which can be a major trading bloc, as you rightly say, we don't really attach as much importance to BCIM as to, say, BIMSTEC? That's a question. Because I would imagine that if we are not interested, and this is something that I'm getting at the very core of our diplomatic practice, is that if you are not really interested, why do you need to get into these kind of groupings? If we have all kinds of problems opening the steel road because our generals think it is very dicey, only 66 kilometers of the road is in India. The Chinese have come, they are part of the road, they are not going to promise part of the road. And if they want to be at our borders, they will be at our borders. If we are not there, it's our loss. If we are there, at least we know what's going on. So, the point I'm trying to make here is that there are some public pronouncements. Okay, BCIM. Now, Li Keqiang comes to India and he does not just talk about BCIM, he talks about BCIM economic corridor. And we agree to explore it. But at the operational level, we think BIMSTEC is better because it doesn't have China. How does it play out? Because as I fully agree with Siddhant, that one of the real areas we need to crack is China, be it trade, be it other things. But we are not very confident, and therefore, we think BCIM is not a grouping that's worth it. If it's not worth it, let's get out of it. Why should we be there? How do you explain this?
Is it for me again?
Yeah, it's for the foreign service.
For me? Okay. No, BCIM, there is no problem. And the point you are making, China, I don't think China is the factor here. Just because China is there, BCIM is not, is not in our interest. Not that kind of thing. But I do agree with you there. We have this habit of getting involved in too many forums and not making the right kind of investments in them. You talked about BCIM, you talked about BIMSTEC. Even BIMSTEC is not a very inspiring story either. There is this MGC, Mekong Ganga Cooperation. That's the problem. We start with a great fanfare and then don't make the necessary investments. That's a common problem for all these forums.
I add that I don't think it's I don't think cracking China is necessarily our fault, because China does have a lot of barriers, non-tariff barriers to Indian imports, even imports from a lot of other places. And I think this is a battle that's been long-standing. So.
At the outset, I apologize. I came a little late at that while Riteshri was in the closing stages of her speech. So I don't know what the U.S. Consul General and she said in the beginning. So I may be excused if it is a repetition.
Don't worry. Just ask the question.
The question is that if borderless boundaries can exist between a number of countries in the U.S., between Europe, there's no visa and it's just a drive across. Borderless boundaries exist between Canada and the USA. Why can't we also have such a relationship with our neighbor that we can emulate that to our advantage? Perhaps the US incoming Consul General may comment upon the situation between Canada and USA and how they have achieved it.
I will take this question. Because I think one of the things that it would be an ideal state of being. And
I haven't completed.
You haven't finished the question?
Yeah, that is one aspect, and second thing is...
Just ask one question, there are a lot of people.
Okay.
The thing is, I think
if there is time, I'll come back.
Absolutely. I think the problem is not that we don't want to break down the barriers. But I do believe that it is equally important to have secure borders, for you to have secure relationships between nations. Next, sir.
I have a question, two questions, one for General. General, you said that there is no chance for future, there is not many chance for future war taking place in our neighborhood. But a few years ago, I was reading in the American library, there are a few flashpoints. One is in Poland, that was between so-called this Russians and Western forces, but that threat has gone for the time being. But there was another flashpoint they have mentioned, that is India and Pakistan, and they gave a timeline that is 2018. And if we premise that there is a collapse in democratic system and Taliban take over the new, there is serious threat of warfare between India and Pakistan. And India must defend its
What's the
interests.
question?
The question is, that's the question. The second question is...
No, stick to one question.
No, that's a very serious
We'll
question.
come back. We've got lots of people.
Okay. First, I never said that there is no chance of a future war. What I said that wars are obsolete. It's not for anybody's benefit. Second thing is, talking about creating flashpoints, the excuse that the raison d'etre of your question, that Poland and then India, Pakistan. Well, this is something which the Americans have stated. However, I would also remind you and the Consul General, the Americans have also stated that as far as Pakistan is concerned, India is not the existent threat, but it is the Taliban and the terrorists within the Pakistan who are the existing threats. I don't see India and Pakistan going to war over Kashmir until and unless there are some very serious interventions on, say, part from our northern neighbors, which would be, I think, what will I say, critical for all parties concerned if this happens. Now, we all know, wars do no good. I'm a military man, I'm saying so. To anybody. It is trade. It is interdependency because of trade, which will help us bond together. It is also trade in, say, manufacturing of non-lethal weapons. You can trade in that. You can trade in small arms, but not high technology. That's also good trade. And disaster management, managing common disaster management so that you don't have to look to US on one side and the other side. I was talking about, I just want to interject. I wonder whether people know that on a daily basis, the border between USA and Canada creates trade of $1 billion a day. Just for information of everybody.
Thank you. The young gentleman at the back.
Can I ask a question?
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Sushruti and I'm a third year law student in Kolkata. And my question is to the entire bench. With respect to the example that was given about the ONGC in Vietnam and how probably a message might be sent because of India's inaction that regardless of what happens, we probably won't retaliate. So my question is the way India is handling its diplomatic relations, is it becoming synonymous with inaction or lack of forceful action, which in turn would impact not just trade but also defense relations and all sorts of other relations with different countries?
No, we talked in a different context. ONGC got a block from Vietnam to drill oil. The drilling had commenced. In the meanwhile, China sank some Vietnamese naval boats and they started strengthening the Spratly and Paracel Islands. India sent a few ships over there on a visit. Now, naval diplomacy is done in this manner. If you send, it is presence, basically presence. Nobody starts a shooting battle there. So that is a message which went across, and I think the Chinese got the message.
Thank you. The young gentleman in black. Well, there's actually there's somebody. Yes. Okay,
Can I ask my question, please? Thank you. I'm a first-year law student, and my question is to me, Sir Arun Roy. So you mentioned that India should not walk the extra mile. That India will not walk the extra mile at the cost of a national interest. Now, I completely agree with that. But I'd like to give 3 examples here. What's happening with respect to... Right. So we the three examples are the Hambata port in Sri Lanka, the Gwadar port in Pakistan, and the Mali airport in the Maldives. Now all these what is happening is China is developing these three things, and isn't it detrimental to India's strategic interest that if India does not walk the mile, it'll at the end of the day cost her national interest. Thank you.
Well, I did not say in as many words about walking the extra mile, but I did say that sacrificing of a nation's interest in the interest of the nation, other nations, is not warranted. Now, I'll give an example of a joint family. In a joint family, let's say there are 4 brothers who are doing well and one is doing badly. It is the duty of the 4 brothers to pull up that brother who is not doing well. Otherwise, he will pull all of you, all the other 4 down. Similarly, if there is one brother who is doing well, which is the case over here perhaps, it is all the others who are sniping at him. What does he do? He can't keep saying, you're right, I'll keep giving you and all that. Not your analogy of Malay, Gwadar, Cocoa Islands or whatever, that is not the analogy I would say put to this. I mean, what can we do if the country wants to give? It's an independent sovereign country, a particular contract to Chinese to do it. Gwadar happened because in 1950 the Aksai Chin road started coming up, in 57 it was completed, and because of that 62 happened. 2010 he started repaving that particular road and he got an inlet into Gwadar. So this is known as encirclement. Now India on its own manner, much of its trade is also through South China Sea. So India started doing in its own manner a little bit of, I mean I wouldn't say encirclement, but presence showing, boots on the ground we call it. Not only in South China Sea, some other places too. So it's a constant ongoing effort. I mean, don't get your morale low just because somebody is in Malay.
You know, we are going to be building a highway through Myanmar into Southeast Asia. If you had to pick 5 industries that we should be pushing on that, to take advantage of that highway, to foster regional cooperation, what would that be?
Five is a big number.
Okay, 3.
Let's start and let's see how it goes from there. I think agricultural produce from the northeast, fruits, vegetables, is going to be very critical. The other thing is the encouragement of inward trade. You're talking only about exports, but I think let's think of trade as two-way, right? While the northeast has foodstuffs and fruits and all that, grains are lacking, whereas you have Southeast Asia, you have very large rice producing, so you have the rice stuff going in. Besides agriculture, I think the establishment of a large hinterland will help to promote industrial activity and industrial investment in our northeast. I think that's one of the big reasons why this road is so critical, because it's a way to develop our own northeast, which has not been done adequately so far. I mean, we've tried, exemptions of excise and all that, but the hinterland has been through the chicken's neck into India. I think if we can push out, we'll have significant investment of all the Indian major engineering goods, automobiles and all that coming up there. Cement is fairly big in Meghalaya. Okay, so you could have cement being shipped out from that on the route. Timber, again, two-way trade. So a lot of it initially would be agriculture-based or natural resources-based, but I think over time you could have significant manufacturing core industrial activity going out from here to there. And in any case, I mean, if you have the dream scenario where you're given access through Bangladesh connecting into that road, then you have anything that's produced in India and desirable, which these days is quite a lot, reaching there.
You got actually one more than fine.
I surprised myself very loud there.
You missed out power, Shiv.
Yeah, power. I missed out power, yes. But you don't need votes for that.
Yeah, but still, I mean, she people like the industry.
If I can just add a point to this, I think we're looking at a gradient kind of market where, the route of course starts with Myanmar, then you go on to Thailand, and you have Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, all these countries, in their vicinity. Now, everything doesn't go to a louder.
Sure.
So one has to be careful. Sorry. It's on. So one really has to keep that in mind. It's a great
Right. So,
good evening to the panel. This is Oyam Banerjee. I work with the corporate houses in terms of training, learning, development in India and outside. Now the question I have is, does India know what it is involved to walk the extra mile? Because when you look at China, China has been making strident steps all across the world. There are 10 million Chinese people working only in Africa. There are millions of Chinese working in Europe, ostensibly for infrastructure development. And at the same time, we have China ring-fencing India all across, working strategically with Pakistan, with Maldives, with Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Myanmar. So practically, India has been ring-fenced over the past 10 years. Has India learned anything from this in terms of what is involved to become A global leadership power, and B, in terms of walking the extra mile? Far enough, fast enough.
I always hear this about millions of Chinese in Africa and not enough Indians in Africa. I will just give you a short account. In countries, in about 50 countries of Africa, there are professors, lecturers, students who sit in classrooms in cities and learn engineering, other technology subjects from professors in Chennai, Delhi, and other IITs, IIMs, other engineering colleges. It's not a mean feat. I know it's fashionable to think that we are not in a big presence. I will tell you that when you land in almost any country in Africa, the first signal on your phone is Airtel. If you go travel through Tanzania, you fill your petrol pumps at Reliance petrol stations. In Sudan, between Sudan and South Sudan, it is Indian soldiers keeping the peace. And in fact, it's one of the best projects between Indians and Chinese is actually in Sudan, where the two countries are involved in drilling oil in one of the biggest oil projects anywhere in the world. And having spoken to the ONGC people in Khartoum, they said they had a blast with the Chinese because they could get along very well and they worked very well. What I'm trying to say is it's not that we don't walk the extra mile. I think there is a sense, certainly within the Indian system, of sort of underplay. Myanmar, India would never have got the kind of space in Myanmar that it did if Myanmar did not turn around, look at itself, project itself in the future and decide that it did not want to become a colony of China. And that is where we are. That is also one of the reasons why Myanmar opened up, why Myanmar said no to the Mine Dam, and why there was still a debate over the copper mines. It's not an easy issue. You spoke about India being ring-fenced on between Gwadar and Sri Lanka, etc. Just look at Hambantota. Somebody raised Hambantota. Hambantota as a port was developed by the Chinese. I think we would have all agreed that Indian companies are really not that great in building infrastructure the way the Chinese are. But It's the Indians that have built that railway line. It's the Indians that have put their consulate in Hambantota. And it's also the Indians that have built almost all of the northern provinces after the war with the LTTE. So if you were Sri Lanka, you would also balance, hedge between India and China. It's a win-win. For Bangladesh, it's a win-win. Bangladesh, if I forget, the Commerce Ministry did a little study where they found that Bangladesh loves to give its projects, commercial projects, infrastructure projects to the Chinese. But when it comes to textiles, when it comes to political influence, the Bangladeshis still look the same. It's the Myanmar, the leadership has, and as Ambassador Sen will testify, I think one of the closest relationships that have been built up between the Indians and is with the leadership in Myanmar. I think India's taken it, I think Ambassador Sen himself has taken a lot of brickbats from a lot of Western countries on Myanmar, and I think India stood its ground with very good results. So it's not, it's, you look at Gwadar, if you go through MEA's files, in 1954, Gwadar was offered to India because Gwadar did not belong to Pakistan. Gwadar was part of the dowry of the Sultan of Oman. It belonged to Oman. And the Omanese Sultan, it used to be administered, by the way, by an Indian until 55. And it was India which said no, because if you look, no, it wasn't a bad decision. If you go to the National Archives and you read through the decisions, and they have declassified those files, it was a perfectly sensible decision that it would be impossible to defend, that it would be a port that would be impossible to defend. And just while we're on the subject of Gwadar, while it has been developed by it has not been developed, it actually was developed by the Singaporeans and then given to the Chinese last year. Between 2007 and 2013, there has been no commercial traffic in Gwadar. So we do, while it is, we do worry about something called the string of pearls, but as somebody in the Indian government once said, it's not a very good piece of jewelry. On that note, I think we will wrap up. Thank you all for being part of this very interesting discussion, and thank you very much. Good evening.
Thanks so much. I think this is one of those evenings where we could continue with questions, and we are going to request you to hold on and we can continue informally over tea after this. But before we end, may I request Mr. Chopra, iLead, thank you for hosting us, and a very big thank you to the students of iLead for helping out. So thank you.
It's a great pleasure and honor to have such distinguished panel in iLead. I personally would like to thank the US Consul General, Ms. Helen, to be here. She's a very busy person finding time to come here. Thank you, ma'am, for being here. And Ambassador Alok Sen, Major General Arun Roy, who's a great friend, Siddhant, whose father I know very personally very well, and our most favorite Indrani Bakchi. Indrani, I tell you, the last time when you had come, you really made a fan following here, and they keep on asking me when is she going to come back again now. So thank you again for coming back. A special thank to American Center and the officials of American Center, and Rita Shri. We feel that she's part of iLead as much as she's part of SPN. Thank you so much for organizing. Please organize some more event like this. We love to have you here. Yeah, and thank you for all of you. I know there are many other events today happening. The fact that you are here, we are really grateful. Thank you, students. Thank you, staff of iLead. Thank you, Dr. Singhi. It was a great Yeah, we'll take a group picture. And before that, I would request. Sorry. I request Pragya to honor our panelists panel with the token of appreciation. I now request for a group picture.